Absolute Punk was at the center of things that were happening in the scene. And this was something that, rocked everybody in such a huge way because, everyone loved something corporate. Everybody loved Andrew, connected with his music. And this was such a oh my God kind of thing. We just felt drawn to okay, what can we do? We need to do something. How can we help?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if your business has a hard time explaining what it does, my company does that in 60 to 90 seconds with an explainer animation. You can just go to drive80.com, that's drive80.com, and check out some samples there. You could also email me at mike@drive80.com to start the conversation. Absolute Punk was a website, online community, and alternative music news source founded by Jason Tate. It mainly focused on artists who were relatively unknown to mainstream audiences, but it was known to feature artists who have eventually achieved crossover success, including Blink-182, Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Newfound Glory, Take It Back Sunday, The Gaslight Anthem, Amberlynn, Thrice, All Time Low, and a shit ton more. The primary musical genres of focus were emo and pop punk, but other genres were included. On March 31st, 2016, it was announced that founder Jason Tate would be reacquiring Absolute Punk from Spin Media, the parent company of BuzzNet, and the website would be shuttered and folded into Tate's new music and social platform, Chorus.fm. I reached out to Mr. Tate on the gram, asked him to be interviewed, and he was delighted. So I got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. When We Were Young Festival, starting Absolute Punk, how honest was he with reviews, spin buying the website, the toxicity of the internet, becoming the place that released new songs or streaming albums, Rob Dobby, Emo Game, Blender's article including him, his relationship with Victory Records, downloading music, brand news leaked demo, and a ton more. Go sign up for his newsletter over at chorus.fm/newsletter. So you can, he sends out a newsletter every Friday or Saturday. He says this at the end of the interview. It's pretty cool. I actually got some new bands to check out because of this newsletter, so it's free, so go do that. Also, check out the band Anxious and the new album Little Green House that he likes and talks about at the end of this podcast. There's a link in the show notes to check that out. One more thing before we start. This week's sponsor is Mint 400 Records. Mint 400 Records is an indie record label from New Jersey with bands across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The label features everything from indie rock and folk to post-punk and soul. Over 400 exciting releases. You can find Mint 400 Records releases streaming on Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, and more, or at all MP3 outlets worldwide. Visit mint400records.com for links and more info. Here's a clip from their band Reese Van Riper's song, Well Runs Dry, from the album The Swamps Are Burning. Thank you, Mr. Neil Sabatino, for always sponsoring this shit. If you'd like to sponsor this, just email thiswasthescene@gmail.com, and I can do that for you. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. So you just did a post about the whole fucking When We Were Young show that's everyone that just blew up the fucking internet. I just heard that they added a second day and that sold out within minutes or hours or something like that.
Correct. Yep, that sold out as well. So both days have already sold out. Everybody's waitlisted. It's it's a little bit interesting to see all of the music that I grew up with and remember being made fun of for one point of listening to all of a sudden dominate, the culture, the online culture for an entire week. And
I know.
It's been interesting to watch.
Someone sent me that flyer, the graphic or whatever, and I looked at it and I was like, okay. And people were losing their minds, are you fucking going to this? I was like, no. I mean, Jimmy Eat World and Dashboard are playing in Raleigh in March, and I bought tickets for that. There was something else, there's a bunch of names on there. I was like, I just don't really care. I don't know. I think I've seen a few. I've seen Take It Back Sunday a lot, and
I think that was something that I found a little bit interesting about the whole dialogue around that. One is that a lot of these bands do tour all the time. Quite a few of those bands are just on tour at least once a year. There are obviously some that do not. There's something like My Chem who are just coming back and have not toured in a long time. And there's some bands that, have been broken up and or don't tour, Boys Like Girls, Starting Line, bands like that. But I think it was Buddy from Census Fail tweeted something about like, hey, this is like a festival show. We're going to be playing like 20, 30 minutes at most. If you want to see us, like we tour, come out, come see us, like give us this sort of support all year long. I think it was Anthony from Bayside said something similar on Instagram. And I thought that was interesting because it was like, it's great that like obviously this scene and this music and this style of music is having a little like moment in the sun here for this nostalgia festival in Las Vegas. But for a lot of these bands, like they haven't gone away. They've been releasing music and they still exist and are putting out music, touring right now. And I hope that, it'd be nice if some of the nostalgia love fest that is being thrown on this specific event could trickle downward to, some of the bands that still are there. And I know a lot of people in their 30s, 40s or whatever that grew up with this music scene and maybe they don't know about that, but maybe it'd be kind of cool if this brought this back into their lives and they realized, hey, I don't have to keep listening to what I was listening to in high school. There's some stuff that these guys have continued to do that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good point. I haven't heard that viewpoint about this because I mean the big conversation, and we'll eventually talk about like the past and stuff, but like this makes so much sense to talk about this right now. But like when you see that's one day and there's so many bands and there's three stages, the biggest dialogue is these guys gonna have like 5 minutes to play. But I was joking. I was like they have to have more time. But the fact that Census Failed, they said they're only gonna have 20 minutes. Like that's crazy to me. I figured at least a lot of these bands seem like they'd at least be playing for an hour.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be hour plus for the big headliners, 30 to 45 for like midsize, and then 20 to 30 for the others. What I've heard is there's some version of rotating stages. So like the stages will actually physically rotate to be able to like keep all of the time between setup down. But yeah, a lot of the like smaller bands probably are only playing like 20, 30 minutes, but they knew that like going into it. That's what they signed up for. It's a giant fest with 60 plus bands on. I think that was the other thing that was a little bit interesting to watch the online dialogue is if you don't follow some of the festivals and like how these festivals are put together, people like were pulling conspiracy theories out for just basic things that happen at every festival. And like, yeah, there's going to be conflicts. Yeah, they overbooked and there's probably going to be some bands that dropped off. But this is just like festival building 101 stuff. And I saw like little TikToks and Instagram videos like blowing up with people like claiming it's a conspiracy and it's not going to happen. I was just like, what is happening? This is so weird.
Yeah, my buddy said he's like, this kind of reminds me of Fire Fests for some reason. I was like, I mean, it sounded to me when I saw it, I was like, it seems like they wouldn't throw all these up, but I think some bands even posted, "Oh wow, we're playing this show."
Yeah, I know that some bands said they were taken out of context with what they were saying with that they didn't know it was going to be as big. I know that basically with some of these little bands, what ends up happening is like the promoter, which by the way is Live Nation, giant promoter, not a Firefest situation, one of the largest in the world, if not the largest. But like they'll call up a band and basically say, hey, we have a festival in Las Vegas and My Chem's playing. Do you want it on? And like that's the amount of information they'll basically give them is like one band because you don't want to tell the band at the very bottom, hey, here's everybody. They tell some people it leaks out too early, things like that. So they'll give them like the top headliner, Paramore, a band like that. They're going to know more about what's going on. But some of these other bands probably only knew 2 or 3 bands that were on, didn't really know the extent of what this was going to be until close to the end. That makes sense. That's also just kind of how it happens. But I enjoy seeing people take tweets like that and then run all the way to this is going to be a disaster. Nobody has thought this through. And it's like, events happen at this venue all the time. These people put on these type of things all the time. So there will probably be mishaps. There will probably be things that go wrong. Like if something happens where the sound doesn't work for, an hour, that's going to throw literally everybody off. And it could be a problem. Like things like that happen at festivals, but that is a festival thing, not a specific to this one type of problem that could show up.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump into asking about like the scene and stuff, but real quick, I was at Coachella in 2014 for a stupid fucking. For me personally, it wasn't really my jam. And Beck was on, and he's given this whole speech, but they're very hardcore. Once you hit your time, they literally cut your sound. And he's given this whole speech like, yeah, like back in the day, someone told me about this little festival in the desert, and I went and I showed up and I played it, and I really want to thank that. And he does this whole thing about how he's so appreciative. he's playing one of his songs and they literally cut the power on him. Like, sorry, dude, you got to fall in line. I was like, wow, that was a flex.
Exactly. The guy's like selling how thankful he is for being there for years and probably helping put them on the map. And then it's just like, nope, not good enough. You're still out.
Yeah, like fuck you, Beck.
It's incredible.
So I think this is gonna be cool. This is such good timing how this worked out with the whole When We Were Young festival coming out, because that was such a early 2000s thing, and Absolute Punk was such, you basically created that. I mean, it says, Wikipedia says 2000, so is that correct?
That's about right. Like basically, I have no idea what the actual date was. I have no idea where they come up with the idea of April 6th or anything like that. Basic idea was I started a version of Absolute Punk at some point around 1998, 1999. Something around there is the first like thing that I put online that I called Absolute Punk. I'm assuming that date is probably close to when I registered the actual domain name. Because I mean, when I first started, I was using like free hosting, like on AngelFire or GeoCities or something like that. It was in the 90s.
Wow.
I had no idea what it was going to be. It was just like I was just goofing around and making a fan page for a couple bands I liked way back then. Like, just I had no idea how to make a website. I was just goofing around and I had no money, couldn't register a domain name. And then so it must have been around like the 2000s when I finally like begged my parents, or maybe I saved up a little bit of money. Maybe I used like a free domain host thing. I don't even remember how I got the domain name the first time, but that's probably what that's referencing to.
So it's gonna be interesting because I wouldn't say the joke about this, but kind of like the tongue-in-cheek thing about this podcast is it's like the late 90s scene was the best and everything else was shit. I mean, granted, I like a lot of bands that were in the early 2000s, which makes it even more funny. But there's this, there could probably be a podcast out there about the late 80s punk scene and how that was the fucking thing, but I'm sure that someone from then, they were listening to bands past that. But the funny thing is Absolute Punk starts right at 2000, and a lot of these stories that I get told from bands is that was always this hill where some of them just couldn't survive that switch because of the whole like fashion core thing like took off, and then it got so polarized and just like saturated with all these different bands. And that's when you start, that's when Absolute Punk takes off, and that became a portal for people to talk about that whole era. But it seems like you also came from the late 90s thing. So I love where I just have a feeling there's gonna be so many cool stories coming out of this. So like to lead into that, how did you get involved in the scene, and where did you grow up, and how did you get involved in the scene?
Yeah, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and little suburb of Portland. Basically, my involvement was I always liked music. Like music was in my life for literally as long as I remember. I remember waking up and reading the Sunday comics, and my dad would have Elvis on, the Beatles on, Simon and Garfunkel, stuff like that, just on the record player. So I remember being exposed to music as a kid, but it was never really something that like I was obsessed with. It was never like a thing that was like I needed to be involved in when I was younger. And, I listened to the same bands my friends did, throughout middle school. There was the Nirvana age. There was the hair metal stuff. I was listening to Metallica, Pantera. Just if my friends had the CD or had the cassette, I guess at some of those times, that's what I would listen to. And then roughly around, it would have been like 98, 97, something around there, is the first time somebody handed me Blink-182's Dude Ranch. And I think my friend left his CD case over at my house, and I was just going through his CDs and looking at the stuff that was in there, Offspring, Everclear, and I saw this CD, with the little 6-shooter gun barrel thing on it from a band called Blink-182, and I was like, let me put this on, let me check this out, and put that in, and it just blew my mind. Like it was a light switch just got flipped, because I'd never quite heard anything like that before, and it was the connection that I had like immediately of just like, oh my god, this sounds like kids my age playing this fast music that are talking about things that I'm going through, and I had like just such this like moment of clarity and like relating to what the music was, and then it had this fast that quick punkish beat to it, and I was just like all in immediately. And it was from there that like everything just spiraled. And at that time, like there was no good way to discover music besides either trying to find like printed zines or looking in the liner notes of the bands you already were listening to. So it's like I'm looking in the liner notes of the Blink album and I'm seeing bands like MXPX, Unwritten Law, Bad Religion, all of these names. And it's like, okay, like these are the next bands that I want to check out that I need to listen to. And that's where it basically all started. It started with one band, listening to them and just being obsessed to the point that I needed to find out everything I could about this kind of music, everything I could about that band and every band tangentially related to them.
So were you like a researcher? Because I typically think, and this is a guess, but if someone's going to start a site where you're going to constantly be doing articles and you're basically reporting, or not reporting, what am I trying to say? You're researching stuff and you're a writer, and so I think typically if someone is they're a big reader at the same time. So like leading up to you finding blank and then eventually starting the website, were you like a big researcher and reader leading up to there?
I've always enjoyed reading. Yeah, obviously reading and writing has been something that's been part of my life for basically ever. And I think for me with the website, it started as a Blink and MXPX fan site. Like it was just, I wanted to mess around with the idea of a website. Like the internet was kind of just becoming a thing. Yahoo was the search engine at the time, and I was into computers. So I really liked computers. I really liked technology. I liked the idea of the internet. Just this new thing was fascinating to me. And so I just started goofing around with like regular basic HTML, started teaching myself that sort of stuff, and was like, I'm just going to make this little fan page. I liked these two bands. I liked Blink. I liked MXPX. I was like, let me put up some photos or whatever. I had no idea what to call it. I looked at a Absolute Vodka ad that was sitting next to like the computer at the time, and I realized that if I named it Absolute Punk, that it would rank highly in Yahoo because they were alphabetizing the rankings at the point. So I was like, I'll just do that. I'm going to be up at the top. So that's where the name originated. And then it was just a fan page. And so it was just me posting like little things about the band, horribly written and spelled, and just, I was 15 or whatever at the time, which is goofing around and doing that sort of stuff. And then people started visiting because Blink-182 started getting very popular. And so then people would check out the website. Other people would make Blink-182 fan sites. We'd link to each other. We'd exchange emails. We'd be on AIM talking about the bands, and we'd be talking about like, have you heard about like what's going to happen with the new album? Are they recording yet? Are they going to go on tour? Do you have like track names? We'd just be sharing that sort of information, and it kind of just built a little community at the time, basically just through email and instant messenger about this fandom. And then as that continued, and as I kept listening to Blink and they kept blowing up, the website just got more and more popular. And then I kept discovering new bands. So I wasn't just listening to Blink. I would, I'd check out a band called Slick Shoes, or I'd be listening to a band like Newfound Glory. And I realized, as Blink's getting popular, man, like I wish that all these people that listen to Blink-182 would check out these other bands, these small bands, these bands that are, just trying to get their foot into the ground. And so I started like recommending them on the website. Like, it'd be like, if you like Blink-182, check out this band. And then people would, write to me and be like, oh, this band's awesome. They're my favorite band now. You should check out XYZ. And then I'd start listening to them. And that was kind of the way that the move from the fan site into absolutepunk.net, as everybody kind of remembers it, happened. I then go off to college. I'm sitting in my dorm room. I have way more time on my hands than I've ever had because I'm slacking off in college. And I just am like, okay, let me just like turn this into something where I can talk about other music. I want to write about the new Saves the Day album. Where am I going to do that? Okay, I can do that here. And so that's where the morph then happens. That happens right as then the drive-through era starts becoming popular. As I'm writing about all of these drive-through bands, that then morphs into Fall Out Boy and me starting to write about Fall Out Boy, and then Fall Out Boy taking everything to the next level, My Chem, all of those bands then explode, and Absolute Punk gets pulled along with it.
It's funny because it seems that there was some method to the madness when you name it Absolute Punk because it's going to rank higher because it starts in A. But some of this you kind of just tripped over it and it just worked in your favor. So like what was the balance there between strategy and, oh shit, that worked out? I wasn't even planning on it.
Yeah, a lot of it was just, just flying off the cuff at that time. Like the internet's new, and the internet's was not as, in my opinion, like algorithmic and thought out the way that it is now. Like now everybody's making content tailored to go viral, to make sure that like I get the exact amount of clicks and the likes, and I need this, and I have to always be on and be posting all the time. And at the time it was kind of just a thing that I did because I enjoyed it, and it was just fun to write about things. And there was always like a method to, I wanted people to see what I was doing. Like I was interested in that. And like if I found like new like Yahoo groups where it was like, hey, here's a Yahoo group about the band Midtown. Of course, I'd go into the Yahoo group and be like, I have this little fan page that like talks about these bands. Check it out, bookmark it, stuff like that. So there was always like versions of, I guess, the method of wanting people to see the website. I tried to grow it. I would advertise it different places on other Blink-182 fan pages. We do shared links, that sort of stuff was involved. But the early years it was a hobby. It was something that I would do after school a couple days for fun. In the early part of college, it was, again, just something to pass the time while I was in college. And I wanted free music, and I wanted labels to send me CDs so I could review them. And it was just something that I liked doing. And I always kind of thought like I'd go maybe more towards the web design world. Like that was kind of what I was also interested in. So it gave me a place to learn web design, learn programming, and try other things that I was also interested in. It gave me an outlet to write. So it just kind of married all of these things I was already interested in into a hobby that then also happened to get very popular and then also happened to be able to make money at one point. So like those things kind of just happened to be happy accidents in some way, maybe just because I was passionate enough about it to continue doing it. And so many other people just fell off and weren't interested and didn't have that same drive to continue doing something like that.
When did it pop off? Because did you live off of it? I know you sold it and then you bought it back. So were you living off of it at some point?
So around junior year of college is the website started getting ungodly popular, so popular that I couldn't keep it up with just me programming it. That's about when Fall Out Boy starts hitting their apex. Panic at the Disco's right around the corner.
What year is that?
So that would be, I graduated in 2005 from college. So that's 2003, 2004-ish range. So that's when From Under the Cork Tree is about to come out, and the website's, so at that point, drive-thru's popular. The website's very, very popular. I'm selling little ads on the side at the time, it's just a little thing that I'm doing. I'm selling for $100 or something, relatively cheap. It's making me enough to have college beer money, not enough to live off of.
That's a lot of money though. That's some great money.
When you're in college, it's this is awesome.
Yeah.
This is just extra stuff that I can have on the side. I don't have to worry about anything. So that's about my junior year, and it's becoming very popular. And so I go to my parents and I'm basically you know what, this college thing, I kind of hate it. I kind of am not enjoying what I'm doing here. This isn't what I want to do is the website. So why am I in college? Why are we spending all of this money for me to go through college just to get a business degree when the business I want to be running is working right now? I should just do this right now. And of course, my parents freak out. They're like, hell no, you are definitely finishing college. There's no way that you're going to take this little website thing. Do websites even make money? What are you talking about? So they think I'm basically out of my mind. But I basically convinced them to let me take a semester off of college my junior year if I will go back and I promise to still graduate on time within a year and a half. So they let me do that just to stay at home in their basement and work on the website. So that junior first semester, I go home and I'm just living in my parents' basement, and I basically recode the entire website to be able to handle traffic better. And I also reach out to a ad company at the time called IndieClick.com that were doing some version of being an ad network before ad networks were ad networks. And so I start talking to them, and I'm basically I need somebody to handle ad sales and talk to labels and do all of that. And they're like, cool, we can do that. So I put them in charge of that, rebuild the website. And that's what that was the moment where everything changed, because then I started making a lot of money. It started almost overnight.
So wait, because a lot of forums, they're a plug and play. You go to a web, if you did a WordPress thing, now you do a website, you go to WordPress, you can either do it on their thing or you could buy it from them and put on your own server, and it's basically built and you can kind of move things around. But back then so when you're saying you're recoding it, was it a plug and play thing that you were rewiring?
So it was a version of vBulletin, but it was at one point where I was actually talking to the people that made vBulletin, and they said that Absolute Punk at its height was by far the largest instance of vBulletin that they had ever seen. Wow, and I basically rewrote most of the front end to vBulletin to handle everything, the fact that we had album reviews and interviews and that homepage that was done. That was all custom code, with the forum itself, the back end being a very old and very hacked together version of vBulletin.
Wow, that's crazy. So wait, what college were you going to anyway?
The University of Redlands. It's in Southern California.
All this is happening. Were you going to local shows, or were you more of a club and a bigger venue kind of guy?
Definitely local shows. I mean, we do Southern California, especially at this time, had shows all the time. We were going out to Chain Reaction. We were going to Hollywood. We were going all over Southern California to see bands. There was a lot of bands that were starting to pop off around that time. You could go one night and go see Slick Shoes, Rufio, the militia group was nearby. So a lot of their bands, Drive Through Records, obviously. So it was like starting line. That was when all of those like Long Island and New Jersey bands would start touring as well. And like big thing was like come out to California and tour. They'd come out. We'd go. I saw so many shows during that period. Yeah, in Southern California.
Were you getting into a lot of them for free because of the website?
Yeah, then that's like kind of then where everything starts moving. Like I take off, the website starts getting popular, and then it becomes like a self-fulfilling cycle where it's like it's a virtuous circle of the website's popular, more bands want to be involved in it, then I'm meeting more bands, then I'm writing about those bands are getting popular, and it just continued to move kind of in that direction. So yeah, we'd go to shows, get guest listed, interview the bands, write about the show. Then they'd play me new music. I'd talk about the demos online, and then more people want to hear about, oh my God, you heard like something corporate demos, like holy shit, like what's going on? They'd check out the website, and then it just continued in that kind of direction, building relationships with labels, building relationships with bands, some that I still have to this day, all just based on, just writing about that stuff online.
How honest were you when you wrote about a band? Because you figure if they're going, hey man, like we really like the site, and I know that some bands even had their own account where they could do like a Q&A or whatever that is. So when they're reaching out to you like, hey, here's some demos or here's this new CD, did you feel a little bit pressure if you didn't like it that you kind of couldn't say that?
I almost felt the opposite. Like, I think I took it the other direction, that I was so obsessed with people not feeling like I was doing favors that I wanted to be so brutally honest that I was actually a dick in places that I probably should not have been a dick about music. Like, I mean, I trashed Yellow Card's Lights and Sounds. Like, I just demolished that album, and it was mean. Like, I was mean about it. And I mean, I still have a really good relationship with Ryan, the lead singer of Yellow Card, to this day, and we talk about it like and stuff, and we like laugh about that. But like, I mean, that's a case of being like, I wanted to go almost the opposite way of like, didn't want anyone to ever accuse me of being biased. And I pretty much tried to build my relationship and like my reputation online as, at the very least, being honest about what I'm talking about. Like if I'm writing about a band and saying that I like them, it's because I actually listen to them, and I actually listen to them a lot and like them a lot. Like there was never any version of somebody could not come in and buy an ad on the website and then I would say nice things about their bands. And trust me, Victory Records tried. Victory Records would buy thousands of dollars of advertising on the website, and then I would be like, Victory Records bands suck. And they'd get very mad at me and be like, we spend all this money, we're going to pull all the ad money from it. And I was like, you can pull all the ad money. I don't care. It's not going to make the music any better. And then they would be like, well, we're going to sue you for saying mean things. And then they would just keep buying ads because we were the largest website handling that kind of music online, and they needed to be in front of all those people. So for me, it was never a feeling that I needed to suck up or try to do any of that. I felt very, very much also that I was just like, I didn't care if the whole thing went away. Like it was like, if the website doesn't work out, like it was never supposed to be anything anyway. It's like, cool, I'll just like go do something else. Like that's okay. But I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity in the meantime, just to try to like, I don't know, make Tony Brummel happy. Like that made no sense to me.
At this point, you said your junior year you quit, and then the shit just pops off. You start making money off of it. So basically this was your full-time gig then, right?
Yep. So then that's junior year. It starts making more money. I go back for my senior year. I cram basically a year and a half into 1 year, graduate college. And then I'm like, okay, what's next? And I'm looking around and I'm like, well, my girlfriend's still here at the time in Southern California. And I'm like, well, the website's making enough money that I can like afford rent. So I start, moving with her in Southern California and get a little tiny apartment and just keep working on the website. The website then keeps making money, keeps growing, and it becomes a thing that is sustainable enough that like I can just do that as a job. Break up with the girlfriend at that time, decide to move back home. And so I come back to Portland and get a place here and just kept working on the website. As I keep working on the website, it keeps making enough money that I can live off of. And as long as it was doing that, I felt no need to do anything else. And that's then I graduated 2005. So that's around 2006, 2007. I don't remember exactly when Spin, at the time, Buzz Media reached out to me, but it was around that time roughly that then I think they were called BuzzNet originally at the time, got a bunch of funding because they had created a like photo sharing website using like Sidekicks or Nokia or something like that. And they got a bunch of funding and were basically going to like try to create a big network of like pop culture websites. So they then reached out to me and were basically like, hey, like at first they wanted to talk about like ad sharing revenue versions of different things and like could we partner in some way because we were a big website. I was struggling to keep the website up because while I taught myself programming, I am by no means a professional at any of that. And so I was basically trying to hire people that I could find that could help me keep the website even online because it was seeing so much traffic. So as the website's getting more and more popular, I'm having less capability as a one-man shop running this thing to keep it online. It's going down and crashing. And then they reach out basically like, hey, like, do we want to do like some sort of ad revenue sharing, or like you could use some of our programmers to like help with the website? And the more and more we started talking, they basically then just were like, well, how about we just buy your website? And at that point, I figured, okay, like I've been doing this for a couple of years. It's making decent amount of money for me to live off of. But like, what's the long-term viability here? Like, is this something that like I'm literally going to be able to do forever? Is this music scene just going to die? Like, what's going to happen? So I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking like, a steady paycheck seems pretty nice. And the idea of like somebody being able to come in and actually like help the infrastructure of the website and help it grow seems like a good idea. So that was what then led me to selling the website. And they, promised a lot of autonomy. They promised a lot of things that did not end up being true. But that was basically the next evolution. That is, I, graduated, was out for a little bit, and then ran the website for them, up until whenever that was 2015, 16, something like that.
So you're making money off of it, and then that's not skewing your like thoughts on the music industry, which to me would seem like it'd be hard if that was like that was like your bank account, and you're like, and then Victory Records is threatening to pull out, and you're like, I don't fucking care. But was there ever like a point where you're like, fuck, man, this thing, like I don't want this thing to go away, or were you ever like, yeah, whatever?
Yeah, I never really felt that, like, because to me, again, like it always felt like it was something that I didn't plan to have happen. And so I always knew I had a skill set that was probably marketable in the industry if I ever needed it. And I can build websites, I can program, I can design things. I'm a decent enough writer. I have connections in the music industry if I ever wanted to go that route. So I never thought of it as a, like, I have to like keep this gravy train running, so therefore I have to do this. It was much more of just say like, if it goes away, I think I'm going to be fine. I still enjoy doing this. So I never felt pressured or felt like there was anything that somebody could hold over me. And I was, I named a website Absolute Punk. I have a contrarian, like, anti-authoritarian fuck you kind of personality, and especially angst in my 20s. Like, I'm calm now, but like in my 20s I was just like full of piss and vinegar and just like, screw this, like I'm not gonna let anybody tell me what I'm gonna do. So I was much more in that rebel phase of my life and much more feeling that sort of thing. So it was never like I never felt anything besides like I wanted to be true to what I was doing, and I wanted to feel comfortable and happy with myself. That was being honest about what I was writing about. And I always also felt that there was enough music that I loved. Like, new bands were releasing albums that I was obsessed with on such a regular basis that there was no need to fake any of it. I did not need to write about some major label band I did not like when Thrice is releasing something like Visu, and I'm just like, this is incredible. Everyone should be talking about this. So I never felt any push or pull or pressure about any of those things.
There's a Reddit article, I think, about when Absolute Punk finally shut down, or there was some article out there, and Reddit can get pretty brutal. Did you find that, because in the beginning when you do something, there's a lot of positive stuff, and over time people in general, I think, automatically just get this kind of like sick of this thing, or they're like, some negative shit starts to develop. And like you had said, you were kind of a dick with certain things you wrote about, and people probably gave you some backlash. Did you find there was just an online target on your back at any point, like shitting on you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, anytime that you put yourself out there, that is something that has been continual through the internet from the beginning up until now. Like, I mean, if anybody gets any just tiny bit of, quote, I'm putting air quotes around this, fame online, at some point they're going to see, again, air quotes, haters and people that are going to start, shitting on them or talking about stuff. And at the time, this was way before, there were, quote, influencers and people that just made their life being popular online. I wouldn't say like I egged it on, but I definitely was egotistical and cocky online and would just like argue with people about stuff. And people, like, I wanted to talk about music and somebody would be like, this band sucks, and I'd be like, no, they don't. This band's awesome, and like argue about that, and was probably antagonistic to some degree. But I think for me, towards the end of the website, what I started to feel just online in general, and I think that the last 10 years, or however long it's been since I shut Absolute Punk down now, what's 6 years, 7 years, has played out, is that the internet has become very hostile, very, very, very mean, and a place that has a lot of dark corners and a lot of toxicity. And I was seeing that play with my mental health in bad ways, of just seeing the internet and the way that the community as a whole was something that I knew I needed to extract myself from, or I was just going to be pulled into feeling upset and depressed and angry and always having this like black cloud over my head. And that's how I felt towards the last, 3 or 4 years of the website and of Absolute Punk, was that too much of it was wrapped up in that. Too much of it was attached to a toxicity and just a feeling of anger and frustration and depression that I couldn't get away from without making a clean break.
What do you think caused so much negativity to start happening then? Like, do you think it was people's strong opinions about a band, or do you think just the internet doing the internet's thing just creates this negative shit in general?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know. I have like lots of different theories about this. All in all, it's hard to see any online community that has not been online for a significant portion of time and reaches a breaking point of having so many people that doesn't in some way turn into something like this. Like if you look at Instagram, you look at Twitter, you look at Reddit, you look at basically any community, once it gets to a certain height and a certain number of people that are visiting it, does start delving into some of the more toxic nature of humanity. And I think the problem with Absolute Punk was it got so big. Like, I mean, at the end, there was over 500,000 people that were posting on it on a regular basis. And that is a lot of people. That is a lot of conflicting personalities. That's not having enough moderators. At that point, Spin's not helping me hire any other people. So it's like, you don't have enough moderators to deal with any of that. You don't know how to deal with it. You decide, okay, like, everyone, we're no longer going to be, using sexist language on the website. And then you get dragged on the internet for censoring people. And what about my freedom of speech? And they're running over to Reddit and being like, oh, fuck Jason, because he's censoring us over here because he won't let us, say derogatory things about women anymore. And it's like, what the heck, man? Like, and it's that sort of stuff that just becomes a colossal cycle of chaos. And then at the time, it was also kind of like the internet and our scene and the world's reckoning with, the last, well, for all of history and how we have treated other people, and like that all kind of coming home to roost at the exact same time as well. And just everything was just wrapped up together. So I think that while parts of it is probably just the inevitability of a community reaching a critical mass where this starts happening, and also probably tied into a mostly men, mostly between the ages of, 18 and 25, young, angsty, depressed in some ways, people online, that creates, the perfect breeding ground for not a nice and fun experience. And that became the opposite of what I want. Like, I don't want to spend my day in that kind of environment. It's like now, like, you get on Twitter and you feel like, doom scrolling became like the word of like 2021 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like, you're just getting online and just being upset all the time. And that was like the opposite of the feeling that I wanted to cultivate, and the opposite of the feeling that I wanted to be feeling. That was not the community that I wanted to be running or be a part of.
Did you have any run-ins with, because there's multiple sites that are around usually, even like now there's so many different things. You got like, you'll have BuzzFeed, and then you'll have Complex, and all these different multimedia, like Barstool and shit like that. But there wasn't really, I don't remember the punk ones, but I remember, I interviewed Travis from Buddyhead. Did you ever have any run-ins with them?
I remember Buddy Head. Yeah, there was never like anything like
or crossed
bad with.
paths or something.
Yeah, I don't remember much with that. I mean, the main websites that I remember like early coming up, it was like punknews.org, punkrocks.net, alternative
Oh,
press. Like
right.
those are the websites that I remember talking about mostly. And there was like an adversarial, like more of like a friendly rivalry with the punknews.org guys early on. And I ended up working with Aubin later. We ended up being coworkers when once Spin bought Punk News as well. But that was more of like a friendly rivalry. Alternative press was more of the like they were the big dog, they were the like the magazine. They were the one that like everybody like looked to and thought about, and like I wanted to be on their level. Like that was the competition to me, is like I want to be considered as big as alternative press. And then off to the side there was something like Pitchfork, which was like the respected version, right? Like we're talking about bands like My Chemical Romance and Paramore and Fall Out Boy and Jimmy Eat World, and they're not touching those bands with a 10-foot pole. They're the quote, adults in the room talking about the cool indie music, which is why I find it ironic now that they are revisiting a lot of the bands from that era and like, oh, actually there's some good stuff here, but that's a different conversation. So they were like more of like the respected version, but I also looked up to them because it was like, this was people that were writing about music in a smart way. And I wanted to be able to write about our music and the kind of music that was moving me in a similar manner, but like to elevate it to the idea of saying like, hey, like I know I'm just writing about, Fall Out Boy over here, but like, can I do it in a way that is trying to bring people to understand why so many people love this band? Why are they popular? Why do I like them? And trying to like explain that and put some context around that. So that was kind of like my relationship with the other websites, was seeing what they were doing and either like trying to build off of it or say I could do something a little bit better or a little bit different, and moving in that direction.
Did you spend any time trying to perfect your craft of writing?
Not like anything besides reading about, like, I mean, I've read writing books, on writing well, and Stephen King's novel and like various things like that. But more so, I just wrote a lot, and especially at the early days of the internet, and even now, like I prefer writing than something like, a video podcast. Or I like podcasting. Podcasting is fun, but it is not something that comes naturally to me. Sitting down and being able to type and get something that's in my head out is basically how I work through things. So if I like have a problem that I'm thinking about, writing about it helps me figure out what I'm thinking about. So it's just something that has always been a natural way for me to work through things that I'm thinking, as well as express myself. So if I'm thinking about a movie, or if I'm thinking about an album, it's much easier for me to sit down for an hour and crank out 2,000 words about it than it is even for me to like sit down and talk about why I like that. I can go back and edit, I can change things, I can actually craft what I would like to be saying in just a way that works for my brain a lot better than other mediums.
Yeah, I mean, you can take like 10 minutes to write a sentence, but it takes you like half a second to say one when you're being interviewed.
Exactly. And then you're like, oh shit, why did I say that?
Yeah. I mean, your brain is like, it's kind of like throwing the words in as it's coming out of your mouth, like real fast. Like, all right, there's a certain amount of time here, and I got to get this thought out. And it's a lot different when you're writing. Like I used to blog back in the day about, like, I was big into like paleo and all this shit, and I used to really like writing. And it's different when when you're talking, because you have to be very aware of what you're saying, like like right now. And I don't know, it's a different animal. Who is the first band that reached out to you when you had started the website and they're like, hey, I really like what you're doing, or hey, we have an unreleased thing that we want you to check out?
Yeah, the first big thing that I remember happening there was still when it was still close to transitioning from a Blink-182 fan page into talking about other bands. And basically at the time, I mean, it was a lawless time on the internet. It's still a lawless time on the internet, but we were doing things like, Blink-182 would release like a new video and we would rip it off MTV and put it online, because like nobody had a way. This was before YouTube. There was not a like site that just had all of these videos. So it was like, well, if you want to watch this like really crappy real player version of like Adam's song or whatever, like come to Absolute Punk, you can like see that there. And we had like some 41 video and something like that. And Universal Music and a guy there, and Universal MCA, reached out to me basically being like, what the hell? Like, you can't just put like videos online. And I was like, well, like, people want this. And he was like, it basically worked out like a like just mini deal with him, basically being like, okay, like, how about instead, like, we give you like a better quality version of the video, and then you can host that on there, and then we will like post and link to it from like blink182.com and like newfoundglory.com when we have like the new video. So like, you'll get the traffic, we'll be able to put like a nice video up there, you can host it and deal with it. And I was like, absolutely. So that was like the first time that something like that happened. And I wish I had like some of the old screenshots and stuff, but like, that was when like blink182.com would like link to us, and like newfoundglory.com and Phoenix TX and like those bands would like link to our website, because like we were then quote like premiering the online version of some of these things. So that was kind of like the early parts of getting a new song release or an exclusive. And then it moved into the internet gets better. There's more ways to distribute music and whatnot. And the first like big like release that I remember doing was after Taking Back Sunday broke up the first time, and John started Stray Light Run. And he messaged me and was just like, hey, I have like these 5 demos that I want to get out to the world. Like, will you host them and like release them? And I was like, sure, of course. And so we hosted the first like 5 Stray Light Run demos on the website for people to download. And of course, killed my bandwidth that month, but it was awesome and fun to do. And that was like, so it was like the first time Stray Light Run's getting introduced to the world, and like we're hosting their demos. So that was a fun one. I remember My Chemical Romance, when they were going to release 3 Cheers, they wanted us to like secretly leak the lead single, which I think it was either Helena or I'm Not Okay. I'm not sure which one we actually leaked, but they wanted it done like hidden on the website. So like basically we did like a news post about like the band, and then like hit a download link in the period at the end of the sentence.
Oh,
so
wow.
Like so people had to like know about it, but then that was how the song got like leaked onto the internet. It was like completely band sanctioned to like kind of build buzz and to like have fun with it type of thing. Pete Wentz from Fall Out Boy gave us, one of the first songs off of Infinity on High. So it was like, that's kind of just how it built, where it was just like, having a relationship with the band, they wanted promotion around something. And so they would reach out to us. And if it was a band that obviously we liked and were talking about and like had a good relationship with, then we would do things with them. So those are like the big ones, all leading up to Cartel's Chroma, which was the first album that we streamed online. And I was like, at the time, again, none of this stuff was built, and none of this stuff was like just an easy plug and play. Let's just put it all on SoundCloud and host the SoundCloud. So I like built the software, like had to go like find out how to stream like music online to make sure people couldn't like steal the MP3s off of it, built a little player, probably a Flash player at the time, to be able to like stream these things, and then released the first streaming version of Cartel's Chroma to the internet. And like that was then kind of it just all spiraled from there and became like just a regular thing that we did, and like that all websites were basically doing at that time, sorts of features and song streams and video streams, etc.
Did you ever see that? Because now you're right, it's so easy. If I were to post a song anywhere, I could do it in like Bandcamp or SoundCloud or fucking YouTube, and it's right there, and it plays easily. You can just link it to your website. Did you find that later on that any of these sites that eventually came about, they were kind of like, yeah, we actually, you guys were kind of a reference for us because we saw it was so wonky or whatever to do that it inspired us to like create this software or something?
Yeah, I've talked to the Bandcamp guys a couple times over the years and have a pretty good relationship with them. And a lot of their stuff was also like looking at the original mp3.com and then looking at like, hey, iTunes is doing this kind of thing over here, but it's not really serving the indie scene as well. I'm not sure how much of any of that was like, quote, inspired by Absolute Punk, but I think that they saw the need and the niche like need that these things needed to exist, and it was such an obvious thing in hindsight, especially, that like YouTube, we should be able to put videos online. They just happen to be the ones to then unlock it in a mass way. So it's interesting to see all these years later, because there were like little things that we even tried on the website where like we had profiles for all the bands, and we never did it in a way that they could upload their music. But then all of a sudden Pure Volume comes along, and Pure Volume did. And Pure Volume had this website where they could all upload their music. And Pure Volume, also a website that was bought by Spin. And I ended up doing a lot of work with them. And unfortunately, it doesn't really exist anymore. But that was that kind of transition. It went from like, hey, here's like, we're kind of doing this one-off version of streaming songs, which is what Absolute Punk was doing, to Pure Volume being like, let's put everything online and try to build a community and anybody can upload their music, to what we have now is something like SoundCloud, where like that is just the only way certain like artists release music, and to Bandcamp and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been like a natural progression, in my opinion.
Did MySpace have any effect on you guys?
MySpace was awesome. MySpace was also great for us just because it was a way for people to talk about things that we were doing. So it was not like MySpace didn't have like a central place that was writing about music. It was more like, this is a community of people talking about music, and this is a place where people are like using music to define themselves and define profiles. And so we just built off of it by having a profile over there, and then being the place that, you know, if a song gets posted, it's usually on our website. And we were usually very quick, and we just had a constant news feed of things going on. So people were constantly refreshing our page. And then if something cool was going on, they'd go over to MySpace and, you know, write about it and send out a little blog or whatever. And then it would just send more people back to us. So it was very like symbiotic relationship in a lot of ways with MySpace. We never was not a like competition type thing. It was like we worked well in the MySpace era because people would do stuff on MySpace, come over to Absolute Punk, talk about things over here, and back and forth. So it was not like a replacement kind of thing.
Did you ever have like any ideas of how to maybe evolve the website theme and maybe expand on it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there was lots, especially in those early years at Spin, like were lots of very grand, very large ideas. And I think I didn't know. I mean, I was in my early 20s, had never worked any sort of corporate job, had never done. This is literally the only job that, quote, real job that I had ever done was Absolute Punk at that time. I worked at Borders for a little while, and I painted houses one summer, but I had never done anything in this kind of environment. So I did not know how to navigate a large company. I did not know how to get things really done in a way that if I didn't just do them, they didn't happen. I did not know how to like build those kind of relationships and advocate for myself. I was also living in Oregon still. The company itself was in California. They were a huge company at the time that was buying websites like Just Jared. They then buy spin.com. So they're doing huge mergers and all of this. And we kind of just got lost in the shuffle. And so all the ideas that I had of like different things that I wanted to do, how I wanted to expand outward, how I wanted to bring other genres in. I mean, it's funny, like looking at this festival, like this is the kind of festival that like for years I wanted to do. Like I was trying to get people to like spend money on making this exact kind of festival with these exact kind of bands. We wanted to go into live music and play around in that space. There was always the talk. I mean, that was one of the reasons Pure Volume ended up being bought by Spin, was how do we marry something like Pure Volume with something like Absolute Punk? And Absolute Punk becomes a vehicle that has music, is selling music, is doing all the things like a Bandcamp. Like, so like those things were all like discussions and ideas. None of them were executed and none of them actually came to fruition. But those were always like things in the back of my mind, or at the forefront of my mind at the time, that I wanted to do.
Was there any websites out there that wanted to partner with you either during this whole Spin era before that, where you were like, fuck no?
I mean, Alternative Press, like a very early on, got like an email of them kind of doing the like feeling out whether or not it made sense for us to like team up or for them to purchase us or to do something. And it just never felt right. Like that just didn't have I did not feel the kind of vibe that I wanted to work with them. I mean, it's not like I knew what I was doing. I ended up deciding to do it with Spin, and that relationship did not work very well either. Nothing else really off the top of my head that I can think of. There were other sites that did similar things as Absolute Punk, and they would try to get us to either link to them for different things, or like would try to create like little rivalries or fake pseudo rivalries with us to try to boost up traffic and things like that. And, probably early on I took the bait, and then later on I just ignored it.
Did you have any connection with, it's funny, I'm just remembering all of this random stuff from back then. It's like, it was weird because it's like in early 2000s, this door opened for even websites to be like rock stars. And there was designers out. There's one guy, I still buy his stuff. His name's Rob Dobby. Do you ever hear this kid?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, yeah. He actually used to give speeches at. He went to RISD,
Yeah.
and one of the things that he did was he gave a speech at RISD talking about how he used our forums to build his brand because he had a little signature that he would like design his little signature with a little graphic of all his cool graphics, and then he would link to fullbleed.org or whatever it was at the time, and get people to talk about it. He talked on the website all the time, and yeah, I still have a nice friendly relationship with Rob.
That's funny. Yeah, I learned about him in 2004, and I would buy Full Bleed stuff. I mean, I think I
Yep.
must have bought like 50 shirts from him over the last like 15 years. Like I even bought some a couple months ago because it was
Yep.
so cool. And I was going to school at that time for graphic design, so I saw him and I was like, this guy's his style was so dope. And I was like, fuck, man, this guy's like living off of his. I mean, in theory, I'm thinking like he's living off of selling shirts and doing all that stuff. And I mean, but he got involved. He was big with bands. Like he would do their merch. He'd do like Wilhelm
Album,
Scream and album
album
covers and
covers,
shit.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this it just blew up where everyone kind of became like this whole like rock star like thing back then. And one of the things that I remembered about this too. Do you remember Emo Game?
Yeah. Yep.
Did you have any involvement with that?
I think I was a character in it, but
Were you really?
yeah, I forgot the guy's name that did that at the time, but yep, I remember that. I remember that showing up. Yeah, it was all of those little things. That was like the fun part of running the website, and the fun part of being part of the scene was those kind of relationships and seeing everybody working together and there being like the fun camaraderie around that. Those were the kind of things that I enjoyed. I enjoyed when something like that could dominate the discourse for a day, right? Like the idea of, quote, an emo game being a thing that thousands of people sat around and talked about online for a day,
Yeah.
like just brings you back to like a version of the internet that's so much better than who's the main character on Twitter and how many ways am I going to dunk on them today. And it was like, no, we could talk about emo game for hours on end, and that was a simpler time.
It was such a sign of the times, though. I mean, that's how
Yep.
cool that time was. That they took bands and they put them into a game because it it, it was an interesting era. I mean, it totally was. And yeah, I just remember that. I think someone actually tried to re put that up a couple of years ago, or it's like you could find it online or something like that. Was there an article that you wrote back then that just like blew the fuck up?
I mean, the first thing that I remember blowing up to the level of, oh God, I got myself in way over my head is I interviewed Midtown right after they left Drive Thru Records. And they left Drive Thru Records, signed to MCA Records, and were about to put out Living Well is the Best Revenge. And I sat down and did an interview with them, which that interview is still online. And they basically just torched Drive Thru, just like gasoline, lit the match, torched Drive Thru Records. And I had no idea. Like I was like, oh yeah, whatever. So I put up that interview and it got picked up at the time, like the equivalent of it, like going viral. Like it was on like Punk News. It was on all of the websites. People were talking about it. Drive Thru Records wrote like their own like lengthy response to it on their website. So it got even more traffic. They threatened everybody and their brother with like suing people for libel and trying to threaten us with lawsuits to keep the interview, to pull it down, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was like one of those things that just became such a my first like experience with like massive amounts of threats and email and traffic and people like saying things and it like becoming like a thing online. So I remember that there's other things throughout the years where stories would get very popular and like things that we were writing or were doing would get popular. There were times where I'd review an album and either say something good or bad about it, and for whatever reason, like those sort of things would go viral. So yeah, before viral was like a thing.
Did you find that like your words kind of move the needle a little bit on certain things? If you gave if you gave an album push that a record label would say, hey man, like when you write these things, we actually see an uptick in sales or like a downtick if you talk negatively?
Yeah, there's definitely a time. There's definitely a time where I felt like there was an influence that we like almost an outside influence that we had about things like that. And that if we were talking about a band, we could dramatically or not dramatically like impact record sales. But it was never to like the level that I think either we got credit for with record labels. Like, I mean, I had record labels ever since we basically started coming to me and asking me to, like, what bands are going to be the next bands? What are going to be the next things? And like, what I basically always had to say is like, look, I can like talk about a band, but like, if the band doesn't have all these other parts to it, they're not going to pop off. Like, it's just not going to be I'm not going to be able to make or break a band, right? Like, I can write about a band like Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy has so many different things about them that led to their massive success. It was not because Absolute Punk wrote about them. I'm able to get a band, and still to this day, if I talk about a band, I'm able to get that band in front of more people, but that is not enough. Like, that's the bare minimum of being able to like see a band then get bigger. But over the years, like we would write about small bands that would get signed and then do huge things. We would also write about small bands that we thought were good that would get signed and basically did nothing. So it kind of ran through the gamut of all of those different things. But the thing that I always enjoyed was seeing a small band or a band that, you know, we nurtured and started talking to when they were super young, all of a sudden see that kind of popularity. You know, like something like going all the way back to like remembering talking to Nate Ruiz from the Format before he was even releasing music, and then all of a sudden now he's, you know, in Fun, which becomes one of the largest bands in the world, and now he's writing for giant musicians and everything. So like becomes huge. Seeing a band like My Chemical Romance like start their little tiny thing and then become just what they became. Watching bands like Taking Back Sunday blow up, watching like all of the drive-through bands, obviously Fall Out Boy, like things like that was always the exciting part. And especially when this music was so big, it was cool watching people that I almost considered like peers to some degree. You know, they're roughly around my age. We both like the same sort of stuff. We're talking online, but watching them find success was just a cool thing to see. And it kind of felt like we were all in it together. Like, you know, Fall Out Boy is getting big while my website's doing well. Like they're seeing success while Yellow Card's getting big while like I'm writing about them. Like it all just felt like it was like part of this larger community that was finding success and happiness in the world roughly like all kind of together at the same time.
Did you think, like, did you ever write any articles about what bands were coming out that were kind of destroying the scene?
I mean, was very vocal about how much I did not like that neon scene of pop punk. I was vocal about, like, you know, there were bands that like I felt would come out and felt like super inauthentic to what was going on. Like, or like we're not holding the torch for like the genre in the same way that I thought other bands were, and just felt like carbon copies or like an inauthentic version of something. Like, I mean, I might as well just keep throwing him under the bus because I still think the guy's kind of a dick online. But like, here's what we aim for. That's a good example. Like, that's a band that I like just never liked. From the beginning was like,
that fucking name angered me when I saw it. I was like, get fucked with that stupid fucking name.
Exactly. Like you immediately don't like the name. You don't like. I didn't like the way that they handled themselves. I didn't like the way that they acted online. I didn't like any of that sort of stuff. And like, it's rubbed me the wrong way. And I feel very vindicated because you go look at that dude's Twitter feed now. He's a dick. So it's like, yep, that was right about them. But so it was stuff like that like I think that, I mean, I've always been very opinionated, and like if I have thought something through, I have a feeling and like a quote take on something. And so like there were bands where I was just like, man, this just doesn't, I don't like this. But at the same time, I was always trying to be very cognizant of the fact that the music that I was writing about was that to other people. Like, you know, the idea of Fall Out Boy coming into the quote punk scene, or like even a Blink-182 into the punk scene out of like bands like Descendants, Pennywise, all of that sort of stuff. And like they were seen as the like outsider. They were seen as the one quote ruining it. And I never wanted to like fall into the trope or the trap of now I'm the old guy just shitting on the new thing because it's new and because it's not what I thought it should be. And always wanted to like at least be aware of that pitfall and be like, if I'm going to shit on a band or like talk about something that I think is like quote ruining the scene or whatnot, I want to have more reason than just I'm the old guy yelling at the cloud, and wanted to make sure that like I'm capable of like being aware of my own biases or my own, you know, what's going on there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. I was gonna say, like, did you have any of that old man mentality going in where you're like, this isn't like this? I mean, obviously it's kind of hilarious because this is a podcast called This Was the Scene. It's like an old man in a rocking chair being like, let me tell you about the good times, you know? And so it's funny that you kept that perspective to be like, all right, if I am going to shit on this, it's not going to be because it's like, well, that name sounds dumb. It's like, let me give it a chance and see like what it is. Was there a band that you when you initially saw their name or their artwork and you're like, fuck this, but then you listen to it and you're like, wow, this is really good?
Let me think. Panic at the Disco. That's one. Like that one. I remember the first
Yeah.
time I heard Panic at the Disco, and I was like, "What the hell?" I was like, "Are you using like a name taken song lyric as your name? What is this?" And like I wanted to dislike it so much. And I remember I got a couple demos sent to me, and I was like, "Just trying to sound like Patrick Stump. Like, is this just like a Fall Out Boy cover band?" I'm like, "What is this?" And then I heard the full album, and I was like, "Fuck, they're actually pretty good."
Yeah.
It was like, "God damn it! Like that's actually pretty good." And so I remember like that was one that I wanted to be. I was like ready to throw under the bus, and then it actually ended up being such a good album that I was like, yeah, I gotta admit that was pretty damn good there.
Yeah, that first, I was dating some girl at the time, and I'd heard of Panic at the Disco coming out. And this was like when I was being a very, very much an old man at the time when new bands came out. I was like, what the fuck? And she's like, you got to hear this song. I was like, this band or whatever. I was like, oh God, give me this shit. And she played it. And those first 4 songs, I was just like, I can't hate this. This is so fucking good.
Yep. No, definitely we're up there with one of those. I'm trying to think of anything else off the top of my head. There's nothing off the top of my head that I can think of that I felt that way about. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted to hate Taking Back Sunday. I really wanted to. And then I've told this story a bunch of times, but a buddy of mine, I was living in San Diego at the time. This is like 2003 going into 2004. I was only there for 6 months before I moved back to Jersey. And my buddy Corey, he was a huge fan. I was like, why do you like this? He's like, well, I mean, I just bought it for the 4th time because I've worn out 4 CDs playing it so much. That sold me on it. I was like, all right, let me go buy this. And so, like, I put it in. I was like, I can't stop listening to this. This is fucking amazing. It was so great.
Yep.
Did you like? I'm sorry, go on.
No, I just laughing about that because I remember I remember that era, but I also just remember that kind of feeling of just being like, I can't stop listening to this. This is like the only thing I'm going to listen to for 6 months.
Yeah, and I love that. Like to this day, I look for songs or something out there that has that, like that one song that holds me hostage that I have to start the day and I have to hear it because I get this like high off of hearing it. And that whole album was that high. It was crazy. I was like, holy shit, man. It's usually just like one song. Did you ever like question if you were qualified to be like the voice of what was going on?
Yeah, I think that's natural. Like the imposter syndrome definitely would find its way in. I also think that I was young and naive enough that the internet wasn't like I didn't really understand or like conceptualize and really understand just how many people were visiting the website until years later. It took me to be removed from that to some degree to realize just how many people were listening to what I was saying. So like I didn't really think about it in that way. Like more of it was just like I have opinions, I'm just typing them online and I'm hitting publish, whatever. So I was kind of like thinking about it that way and not thinking about it as a X amount of people are checking this out on a daily basis. You have a responsibility to anything. So it was that sort of feeling. And then also wanting to make sure that I was like trying to do the right thing. And that was way more towards the end of the website, was the idea of if people are going to pay attention to me online at all, is what I'm doing creating a positive impact in the world? Like, am I actually saying something that is going to move things in what I would consider the right direction versus the other? And so it was more of a feeling of like that sort of responsibility and commitment to try to shepherd the scene or a music scene in a more positive direction. And that sort of responsibility, I mean, ultimately ended up also being one of the reasons like I had to remove myself from it, because that felt too much and too big and too impossible. So that was more of the feelings that I started feeling.
Do you think like if you had all of the apps and the websites now, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, when they're as popular as, I mean, Twitter's only been, when are they, was 2010 or?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that sounds right.
So this is like 2000, 2001, or like this is like if it was like the right around the time where the websites are blowing up. Do you think if you had like all the Twitters and Instagrams and stuff, like as big as they are now back then, do you think you would have utilized them or saw like with the eyes you have now been like, oh man, I wish these were around then because I could have done this with them?
Yeah, I almost feel like the opposite. I think that Absolute Punk was able to exist in a lot of ways because those other outlets weren't there.
Yeah.
The moment something like Instagram and Twitter allows the bands and fans to almost have that instant interaction, it kind of removes a lot of the need for something like Absolute Punk. Absolute Punk was more of an aggregation of what was happening in the music scene at the time. And a lot of that was around the fact that there was one point of contact, usually me getting an email from a band or the PR or the label or whatever, and then posting it online. And that was how the dissemination of that happened. Whereas now, most bands, labels, everyone kind of owns that entire stack themselves. Like they can be the vehicle for promotion, they can be the vehicle for news, they can be the vehicle for the story that they want to tell. Whereas, and like just completely remove somebody like me. Like there's no need for like that aggregation to exist if a Twitter feed exists, if Instagram exists, if you can just post your own stuff up on YouTube and post about it on your social media network and keep that little community itself. It kind of removes the need for something like that. I also like have found now that like those things exist, Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, is like my personally is not like good for that sort of stuff. Like I am not the person that's going to like, I follow a lot of these people on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and stuff that are really good at that medium. Like they are very good to like get on Instagram the moment something happens and post like a quick like 30-second video about it and get the news out about this sort of thing, or have an opinion on it and like are really animated on the video and really good on video, really good in that sort of thing. And like that was just, I'm not like, that is not my personality. Probably wasn't back then. It's definitely not now. That is not the kind of thing that I think I would want to do almost. Like, I mean, I definitely don't want to do it. It's why I don't do it. So I think that would have been a different way for all of those things to interact. I think that when I think about like the internet now, and if like something like I would not want to run a website of Absolute Punk's size in today's internet, which is specifically why what I do now is on such a smaller level. Is I would not want to every day wake up and be like, okay, am I going to say something today that's going to have all of Twitter mad at me? Am I going to do something that is going to cause the entire internet to have feelings about something that I have done, and that sort of thing. So I think that like those apps and Reddit and all of that stuff taking over, I mean, is the natural progression of something that like Absolute Punk kind of started. And it showed that there was a demand for that kind of thing and a demand for that kind of back and forth with fans and bands. And then this is like the natural evolution of just removing that whole step in the middle to the direct interaction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like you built your own little corner of the world's almost like niche wise. So it's like it almost kind of goes with the theme of if you have a music scene, which we had, and you'd go to see a band, like you'd make an effort to go to that club or the Legion Hall to see them. And it's almost like what Absolute Punk was. It was almost like an internet Legion Hall or like club, and and that like for a band to say something that gave them the platform, like they'd have to go there. But now since you can see them directly on, it's like the whole Every Time I Die thing that's going on right now. It's fucking nuts. But they even took down like their account, the Every Time I Die account's gone. But you have to go to Keith Buckley's personal page and see this giant fucking write up of his side of it, and you go to Jordan's page and it's like a totally different thing, and you're like, well, I don't have to go to another website. And then I saw something like there was something on YouTube. They're like, oh, here's the story. I was like, I already saw this because I follow them directly. Like, I don't need to go to these websites that kind of just put articles.
Yep, and exactly. And back in the day, that would have been a thing that like that happened through Absolute Punk. I mean, when Further Seems Forever, when Jason left Further Seems Forever, he emailed me the statement, and like I posted the statement up, and like those were the kind of things that, and like today, like I mean, I posted about the Every Time I Die stuff on Chorus, where I still write, but I don't do it in the same way that I probably would have done it during the Absolute Punk days, because during the Absolute Punk days, that would have been like, this is going to be a story that's going to dominate the entire week, and it's going to be something that we are writing about the entire week, and there's going to be so many opinions, and like the story would play out basically on Absolute Punk and where everyone's talking about. These days, I definitely don't want that. But the story itself plays out on Twitter. It plays out in the comment section of Instagram, where it also gets mentioned. It plays out on Reddit. It plays out in this Discord over here, or this private Facebook group over here. And there isn't like that centralized place where everybody's talking about it. And that was the thing that Absolute Punk was. It was at the very least that lightning rod for literally the discussion about anything.
Well, like bands could go on too, and then they could actually comment and answer questions when that happened, right?
Yeah, and they would, and like that would be like stories would break, and like stories would happen from comments on like in like we'd be posting about a band or some sort of thing that happened, and then band would show up and start arguing with people, and that all of a sudden becomes another story, and it like just became a cycle that would perpetuate itself.
I read that you were Blender had you the top 25 most influential people in online music in 2007. Like, what was that like?
I'm pretty sure that was basically just Pete Wentz being like, "I'll be in your article if you bring Jason along as well." I'm pretty sure that's what happened or something like that. I think that at the time, like that was the period where labels. I got offered to do like a variety of different like A&R things with labels and turned them down. Like A&R was not something that I ever really wanted to go into. That was not what was interesting to me. Like the idea of like finding one band and shepherding them and being like that at the label level was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about music and tell people about music and tell people about all sorts of great bands and not be like, oh, I found out about this little band. I can't tell anybody about them until I get them signed specifically to my label and then try to make sure they happen and then have the entire pressure on me to make sure that they blow up. That was not something that like I was interested in. I was much more interested in the other side of like the promotional stuff and being able to write about and talk about stuff that I was excited about. And then hopefully other people were into it as well. That was where I was coming from. But I was more than willing to like talk to labels and tell them bands that I thought they should sign and be like, I think that this is a great band. You should be giving them money and you should be throwing promotion at them because they have what I think it takes.
Yeah, it seems like that was the OG kind of 30 for 30, how they interview those entrepreneur things that they do now.
Yeah, that's so funny. I forgot all about that until right now.
Yep, digging up all this shit. Were you friends with, and this is like kind of like a jump, but were you friends with Andrew Kaman when he was diagnosed with leukemia and then you guys did the whole fundraising thing?
I would not say like friends. Like, I mean, I've known Andrew for a very long time. I knew a lot of people in his orbit. I knew like I was close with his manager and people that worked with him at the time. And, I've spoken to Andrew many times and hung out with him quite a few times over the years. But I knew people that were closer to him, and it was through those relationships. And it was, especially with that, was such a thing that, again, it was like the connective tissue of the scene, right? Absolute Punk was at the center of things that were happening in the scene. And this was something that, rocked everybody in such a huge way because, everyone loved something corporate. Everybody loved Andrew, connected with his music. And this was such a like, oh my God kind of thing that we just felt like drawn to like, okay, what can we do? Like we need to do something. How can we help? Like what can happen? And I remember talking to his label and like people around his that were working with him at the time of like what's something that we could do. I knew he was really interested in this charity. This was at the time of like the Live Strong bracelets and those rubber bracelets being such a popular thing just in culture in general that it was like a perfect way to like marry all of that together and do something that we could put our weight behind. We felt like we were helping. We were able to raise money for charity. People got a cool thing. It was something that people could feel good about in the music scene and connected to. And so that was kind of like where it all happened and how that whole thing was conceived. And then it became my mom and dad and sister and I filling thousands and thousands of envelopes with little orange bracelets and my parents getting roped in and there just being envelopes throughout the house. And we bit off way more. That was definitely another one of those moments where like something became way bigger than I expected. I put something online and I'm thinking, oh, we might get like, I don't know, 100 people or whatever, and ends up being like 30,000 people. And it's like, oh, that is way bigger than I expected it to be.
Holy shit. Wait, so you had 30,000, but it said you guys raised just a little over $16,000 for the Leukemia Research Foundation.
I should look that. I think the number was like,
that doesn't sound right.
I'm pretty sure the number was close to like $36,000 if I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, like because if you're stuffing 30,000 fucking bracelets,
yeah, I should double. I mean, I'm sure I have the information somewhere in some file, but the number to me was that I remember off the top of my head was something over 30,000.
That's wild, man. That's so freaking cool. Were there any like stories that you got put on your lap and you were like, I can't release this?
I'm sure I could probably come up with something if I thought a little bit harder or had more time to think about it. There's nothing like off the top of my head that I can think about. There were stories where things would happen anonymously or things would be said anonymously that I I think I still have like the same sort of feeling that I do now is if I couldn't verify that I knew where something was coming from, I had a hard time ever wanting to run it. Like, so I needed to know, at the very least, be able to say, I know who the person is that this is coming from, and then word it in X person said XYZ or whatever it would be. I wouldn't run like secondhand anonymous stories about things, even if I was pretty certain that they would be true. I needed to have like some belief that I had done my due diligence around them. And a lot of that involved making sure like I knew where it was coming from, what was happening there. And a lot of that was also just like covering our own ass. Like I did not want to write about stuff that or say anything that was going to get me in any sort of legal trouble.
Did you have any legal issues or legal trouble throughout the?
I mean, Tony Brummel definitely has threatened us many times over the years for different things. Like usually it would be a band would do an interview and say bad things about them. Hawthorne Heights would do an interview and say shitty things about Victory Records. We would post the interview, and then Tony would threaten lawsuits against us for what was in the interview. And like, which is hilarious when you think about it. You're like, you're getting mad about an interview and you think you have the legal recourse to pull down the text on our website because of the interview. Like, what are you talking about? But he definitely attempted that multiple times, but definitely nothing that like ever was real. Like I've never been actually sued. So
Well, that's good. Did you like
Yeah.
when you had first started it? This is kind of going back to a question I want to ask earlier. Did you have like an office and like a team?
No, like when I first started it, I mean, it was just again out of my dorm room. And I remember going to my parents when we first started making money and basically being like, what am I supposed to do with this? And like they helped me guide like through the process. And my mom did like the research of like, well, I'm gonna have to create an LLC and like how to make it an actual like business. My parents helped with that. I then worked out of my parents' basement through college, like a little room down there. And then I had an office in the house I bought and basically went to Costco and bought two giant, large 6-foot plastic tables and put those in there, put two giant shelves that just had CDs on it and just worked out of the home office basically by myself. And everybody that worked with me on the website at the time were all also scattered around the entire country and / world. You know, we had people all over the place. And so there was never any reason really to have anything centralized. And I didn't want to like, spend money on a office setting where it's like, well, it's just going to be me at the office anyway. I might as well just do it out of a bedroom. And I kept that here. I mean, here I have a office in my home here. That's just my office, my computer, where I work from all the time because it's more of just the way that I have always done it, I guess. So I just continued it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I saw around that era in Absolute Punk, I could definitely probably connect the dots to this too, but because that whole I was talking about earlier about like Rob Dobby and then there's all these like the emo game, it was what I saw for me was opportunity because of all of these young people in the scene doing this stuff and making a career for themselves. And I remember it was like 2004, I was living in San Diego. And I was like, I need to go to school. So I moved back to Jersey and put myself through graphic design school and just did like a technical school for 10 months. And I saw this opportunity that was like, I don't ever want to work for anyone because I had been in a punk band and like toured. And I was like, I like being free. And when seeing all this stuff, and to this day, I've been working for myself for like 17 years now. And like my office is like right now, I'm doing this through a laptop. I'm sitting on my couch in my apartment. I'm like I'm in sweats and like a just a shitty shirt. It's like
Yeah, exactly.
it's so fucking dope to like do this. But seeing you guys do that stuff back then. And the technology we have now is way more fucking advanced, and you can do this stuff even easier now. But I mean, it just gave me personally, I was like, this gives me hope. Like I can do my own thing, and I thought that was pretty cool.
I think that was also for me, it was like watching again, like people I considered peers, like make it doing what they were doing. Right. So it's like I watch a band like Yellow Card or like The Starting Line. And like these are people that are ostensibly my age, my same years of life experience. And like they're making it, they're like forging ahead and like working so hard and like making it work. And I didn't know any better, like I'm 20 years old, just out of college. I have no idea. I know that I'm probably not going to be great in a corporate office environment, that is not the kind of thing that I would succeed in. And it was like I didn't know anything else, and it just snowballed into what it ended up being and working. But I felt the same thing. Like I did not want to. I saw my friends at the time graduate college and start like these jobs, and like they'd come back and be like, "Oh my God, I'm working for corporate job XYZ and I fucking hate it. Like it is just sucking everything out of me, and I'm making no money and this sucks." And I was like, yeah, I just did not want that. I did not want any part of being in that kind of environment. And it felt like it would be completely antithetical to what I wanted to do and just soul sucking.
I have a couple more questions. I'm gonna wrap it up. Did you, because this is a whole era where downloading music starts, and you have a website that's built on supporting bands and talking about music and things like that. Did you find that you fell into the download trap? And if you did you struggle with that?
Yeah, what was hard was that because we're so popular, because we were such a big website, and because we're a thing where people could post whatever they want on the website, right? It gets put through without basically very little filters right away. So especially at the early part is things would happen, things would leak, and people would just post links to them on our website. And that's something that like I could potentially be legally liable for if we know about it and don't take it down. And this is before DMCA and like all of the like more legal protections have been put into place to like deal with it. But that was like the first big problem was things would leak, and things would leak early, and then people would want to talk about it and share it on the website. And that caused problems with labels in a variety of reasons. One, say a band's album's coming out like in August or whatever, and it's January, and there used to be a much larger time between when a band would announce their album and when it would come out, and then it leaks in January, and everybody's talking about it on the website. They'd be rightfully like upset and like worried that the entire hype and like cycle of that album is going to be over before it's ever actually able to be in stores. So they'd be sitting there like, nobody can buy this album. Like, you got to keep people from talking about the album. Be like, I can't keep people from talking about the album. It is out there. Like, this is like, you can't put that like back in the tube. This has happened. You guys need to adapt your model to figure out like what you're going to do instead. Like, release the album now. Like, be more ready for this sort of thing, because this is going to continue to happen. So basically like what ended up happening is it shifted our discussion around music and what was going on from a label-centric labels releasing an album and it's coming out on this release date. We're going to put in a review up 2 days before the release date or on the release date or whatever, way more into this is what the forum and the community is talking about right now. This is what we're covering right now. Yes, the new Acceptance album leaked. Yes, we're going to review it now. No, we do not care that like it is not technically out for a few months from now. This is like what everyone's talking about, and therefore we are going to write about it and also be involved in that communication. These days, it's much more moved back into a release date centric thing. Things leak very infrequently comparatively. And everyone that has a streaming service kind of is just ready to wait for Friday and be like, let's just talk about it then. Like, let's just wait till when it's going to come out. We have access to all of this stuff. But during that download era, it was a positive and a negative for basically everyone. It was a positive in that more people had access to music for the first time. You didn't have to wait and go buy a CD and basically maybe get 3 CDs a month if you're lucky, like, you know, because they were $20 each or whatever, to all of a sudden everybody being like, well, we can download basically as much music as we want. Therefore, we can talk about as much music as we want. We can explore new genres. We can explore new types of music. But it also was the turning of the business model of how are they going to make money off of any of that. And some bands figured it out, some bands didn't. A lot of bands ended up selling a lot more merch because of it. A lot of bands probably became way more popular than they would have been because people discovered them through a couple of MP3s somewhere. And I'm sure other bands were hurt from it. So, yeah.
Did you guys have any part of the brand new demos that leaked when they right before Devil and God, and they put like maybe 2 of those songs on the record? And in my opinion, there was like 4 songs in the demo that were way better than a lot of the songs on Devil and God.
Yeah, those definitely leaked on our website. Like, so like that was a thing where I was sitting online and people were like kind of talking about them, and someone sent them to me. And I called their manager on the phone, and I was still in California at the time. I remember calling him on the phone and being like, dude, what is this? And turning my phone to the speaker and him being like, that's Brother's song. Fuck, how do you have those? And just being like, they're like people were talking about them online. So I remember their label messaged the kid that was talking about them on the website and basically was trying to get him to sign an NDA to like be like, you're not going to be able to give these to anybody. Do not send these to anybody. And like as that was happening, like the zip file was like shared everywhere. And like that was one of those things where it's like we were trying to take it down just as fast as it was being shared, which is basically impossible. And it's like, again, one of those things like once it's out there and once people have it, like it just spreads. And it was that sort of stuff that was really hard to also watch. And like I felt so bad when bands' albums would leak. Like I remember Thrice's, I think it was Beggars, that leaked because the label had like opened up some version of their like website where it was supposed to be streaming, but all of a sudden everyone had the download to it. And it was like 6 months before it was supposed to be out, 7 months before it was supposed to be out, something like that, where it's like they don't even have the chance to have like a regular album cycle because this album's just out there now and everyone has it. And I think that those are the kind of things that I always like. I felt bad for the bands. I felt bad for the labels and everyone that like their career, their life like is going into this album, and all of a sudden it's just like it's there and there's no good way to like take that back once it's happened.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you literally were at like the front lines of so much shit that was going on back then.
Yeah, and that was also part that like led to what I would consider probably a burnout with all of it. I felt like I had to be on all the time. Like I felt like the internet obviously never sleeps, but I always felt like I needed to be online seeing what was happening. Like, is something going to happen? Is this band going to do this? Is this going to leak today? What's happening over here? Is there any drama here? What happened at the shows last night? Did anybody say anything on stage? Like, has anybody like reported in on, a band saying something outrageous on stage? Like things like that sort of stuff. And I felt like there was such a needing to always constantly be monitoring not only the website itself, but like all of the social media, email, et cetera, like just became such a overwhelming thing because I felt like we were in many ways the center of that. And I wanted to have like, tentacles outward to discover and hear all of the different things that could potentially be happening.
That's crazy. So like, why did you end up buying, because you sell it and then you bought it back in 2016. Why'd you do that?
So like bought it, they sold the website, or they bought the website. Lots of up and downs with spin, lots of different things happened there. And then towards the end, basically they went bankrupt. They had no more money. They had burned through something like 60, $70 million or something like that.
Wow.
At some point that they just burned through. And that is an entire other story that we could probably talk about for hours on end. But basically they were going bankrupt and were going to sell off all the assets and whatnot. And so I went to them and basically asked, like, can I take the website back? And they were basically like, well, no, we can sell the website for quite a bit of money if we wanted to, and we're just going to do that and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, that sucks. It's basically like my life's work. That's like everything that I've done since I was a teenager. Like I bought that domain name when I was, 15 or whatever. So there was like discussions, and basically it came down to like to make it in a way that like I would be able to afford it, that I could buy the domain name and all the IP back. So like the logos, the name, all of that sort of stuff, but not the database itself, which included all of the like posts and forum posts and all of that stuff, would be something that we could work out. So like that was at the time when I realized I'd been thinking a lot about how much I wanted to continue doing something like this going forward, and realizing that like I did not want to keep running Absolute Punk. Like that was not the website that reflected who I was in 2016. That was not the website and the type of thing that I felt that I wanted to be doing. Again, I was talking about burnout. I was talking about like depression. I was talking about like the toxicity that I felt coming from the website. And so to me, it felt like a great time to have a clean break and rebuild something that was more me now. But at the same time, not just have to give up on my past and not just be like, well, that Absolute Punk thing just kind of exists. I mean, there was various other websites that were trying to buy it at the time. Like that just exists somewhere else. That domain name is nothing anymore. I was like, well, at the very least, if I can take that back, if I can have that in, my back pocket as mine, that is keeps the history of that website with me. It allows me to, control the destiny of that logo, of that name in perpetuity. Then I can do that while also using that to create something that is much more me and something that I feel is more meaningful to where I'm at today going forward. And that was kind of like the genesis of that, of a restart and a rethinking of what I would like a community, what I would like a quote blog type thing to be in 2016, let alone here 2022, of what I want to do online, basically.
Is this so Chorus FM, is that your full-time gig?
I'm actually, so then the pandemic hit. So basically, walk all the way through everything is that Chorus is basically based off the idea of makes money off of ads and also makes money off of supporters. So basically like Patreons and people that give a little bit of money each month or year to be able to like remove ads, get a bunch of different perks on the website. Right. So everything that started in 2016 and everything was running very smooth and like great. And like we were obviously not doing as much traffic as Absolute Punk did, but by design, but had a much better, smaller, tight-knit group of a community that could be run in a way that I was much happier with. We could write about only the things that I wanted to write about without the pressure of clicks and hits and clickbait and blah, 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 blah. Corporate overlord stuff, everything was going very well. And then the pandemic hit, and basically within 3 months, ad revenue was cut in half, and the Patreon support maybe about 25% died off, which makes sense. People stopped buying ads, and people all of a sudden were very worried about everything, and giving $5 a month to a website became less something that they wanted to do. So at the moment, it is not my full-time gig. It is more of just it's something that I do work on every single day and is a big part of my life, but it is definitely more of a side hustle at the moment that I'm working on. But yeah.
Did it go in the direction that you wanted to, like your vision that you had?
Yeah, it is what I want. What I would like my contribution to the internet to be at the moment is what it is. So like if I look at the homepage and like the first part of the pandemic, I redesigned the website, rewrote a bunch of different things. It is the website like I've always wanted to build, like going all the way back to the first version of Absolute Punk in my head of how I would like a website to work, how I would like a website to run. It is not the coolest, most like technically awesome website in the world. It's very simple in many ways. It is not filled with all sorts of technologies that all the cool things can do. It is not a YouTube channel. It is not an Instagram feed. It is my version of a blog, but exactly the kind of version of a blog that I like. So it is a extension of me and my personality in the best way and maybe in the worst way as well. But like it is what I would like to contribute to the world and to the music scene and to music in general. This is where I write about music. And a big part of what that ends up being is I write a weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday or Saturday where I talk about things that I like. And I still do the same sort of stuff that I've been doing basically my entire life to still a relatively good sized amount of people that read it and that check out what I write. And then we also still have a forum where people come and talk in a community. Again, not as big as Absolute Punk, which is very good, but it is a forum that is much more, at least it tries to be built around the idea of like, let's try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Let's try to be nice to people as much as we can. It does not need to be everybody biting their heads off all the time. And it is obviously a work in progress. All of that is, but it is definitely, if Absolute Punk was the manifestation of, my brain at 15 or whatever, Chorus is who I am here at, what am I? I'm 38. So as a much older human being, but it is what it is.
So before I ask the last two questions and wrap this up, is there you've done a lot of interviews because I was looking online to see, you did one recently, like very recently, I think September, you did like a podcast or something like that, or like a year ago. And I'm sure a lot of questions I asked you probably had been asked multiple times, but there is like a different audience. So, or there might be someone in the audience that I have that were like, they haven't heard you talk before. And I started asking this recently, is there like a story that you've always wanted to tell in an interview, but you haven't, and this would be a good time to do it?
This is a good question. That's a really good question. There's nothing like off the top of my head that really comes out. I mean, the only like type of thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I was talking with Drew Barringer on the website about this just last night, was how much we wanted to do a version of like this festival that right now is really popular. And like I remember times at Spin where we would do things like little showcases at like South by Southwest and things like that, and we'd get to pick the bands, and everybody, like our corporate overlords, as we came to call them, would like be shocked at how popular our stuff was. Like we had like Motion City Soundtrack, Hello Goodbye, doing like a showcase once, and like all these kids came out to it, and like there's photos and like videos of like around the block people lining up for these things, and like everyone would be like, what the heck, like didn't know these bands were this popular. And I'd be like, I'm trying to tell you, like these bands are resonating with people, like kids like this is something that is definitely popular right now. And it never really got the like attention, the time that I think it deserved. And like the fact that I remember Drew and I sitting in like meetings being like, I wanting to do live performances, festivals type of thing around bands like this. And then now seeing it actually be popular and actually have this kind of revitalization and time in the sun has been interesting to watch and fun. And it's kind of like a vindication. Like I know I did not get put on any of this. I am not involved in any way in this, but there has been a vindication to see the outpouring of love for a time, specifically in my life, and a music genre that has been very intertwined with my life and connected to me, see this kind of popularity. And to me, I feel vindicated in many ways of like what I did for so many years, just to be like, yeah, see, I was right. People like that shit.
Yeah, it's such weird timing that I scheduled this with you. It was just completely on a whim. But it just that and happening at the same time as this festival is just funny to me.
It really is.
It's so random. All right, cool, man. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up with two questions. One, what would you like to plug? It could be about something you're doing. It could be something about what a friend's doing. It could be both.
Yeah, I'll plug the newsletter that I was just talking about a little bit. I have a newsletter that I write. It goes out. It's free to everybody. Chorus.fm/newsletter. You can sign up. It's free. It talks about music I like, usually articles as well. Like if I see something that I find interesting, usually entertainment. If I watch like a TV show or movies and I'm talking about, I also share various like thoughts on stuff like this one. I wrote most of it last night and talking a lot about the festival. And like my connection with it, a lot of like about Every Time I Die and my relationship with Every Time I Die and how sad I am to watch that whole thing play out online. So if you want to sign up for that, definitely do that. If you're interested in this kind of music, obviously, I still talk about new bands. I still talk about old bands. I talk about when Fall Out Boy is going to do something. I talk about new music, new band that came out with an album yesterday called Anxious, which is fantastic. And so if anybody wants to check out a newish pop punk / emo band, the band is Anxious and the album is it Little Greenhouse? It's something like that. Let me double check.
Yeah, I'm going to check this out too. Yeah, Little Greenhouse.
Yep, Little Greenhouse is the name of the album by a band called Anxious. Came out yesterday on Run for Cover Records. Very good, and everyone should listen to that.
Cool. All right, man. Last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Scene ethics. I like that. That's a really good question.
I know. I'm just kidding.
I think for me, a big part of it is the integrity and being true to yourself. I've been listening to a lot of Pennywise recently, and I think that Pennywise, they have this like in a lot of their songs, this like you can do it mentality, this self-determination, self-reliance sort of message of like believe in yourself, move forward with yourself and believe that like you centrally are capable of controlling your destiny in a lot of ways. And I think that is something that I always enjoyed with the scene. The story that I've told many, many, many times is the first show that I ever saw was MXPX, the Ataris. And I remember being in the pit for MXPX and there's, I thought thousands of people. It's probably like 50 to 100 kids, right? But everyone's sweaty, moshing, pushed up against the pit. People are falling down. Everyone's reaching down to like pick up the person next to them. Nobody cares about anything. Like at that time, like I'm in this pit with a bunch of punk kids. I'm wearing like cargo shorts and like a polo shirt because I have no idea what a show is. It's literally my first show ever. And I'm this weird little preppy kid like showing up. No one gave a shit. Everyone was just there for the music and enjoying themselves and trying to get along and just screaming our lungs out, people picking each other up if they fell down, no politics involved in any of that besides just the music and being there together as a community. And I think that those are the kind of things that I like to take from the scene of the times where everybody was there for each other, that you could lean on and know that they had your back basically no matter what. And it was connected to just this weird, silly little pop punk bands that we were listening to.